of 1683, John Wood paddled up the Woodbury Creek and came to this Indian trail, and that, which is now Broad Street, and that Indian trail and the creek was the place of the founding of the city of Woodbury in 1683. And then in 1714, they began building the meetinghouse, which was finished 300 years ago in 1715. In 1715, this was the doorway, and over this doorway, there was a roof that just covered the doorway, and there was a mounting stone there. And if you take up these bricks, you'll find another side equal to that side, and it is obviously the way that they entered into this building in the spring of 1715. We are now entering the building as they would have entered the building back in 1715 when the building was completed. And there are several aspects of the architecture that we know about because we have blueprints of the original building. So there are several points that needed to be made, one of which is that this is the front of the building, and the front of the building faces what is today Broad Street, but at that time was a narrow trail, large enough for a wagon to go up and down. And then this was the door that people would enter to come into the building. And the style of architecture was Georgian architecture. And that meant that if you had a window on one side, you had to balance it with a window on the other side. And if you had a doorway on one side, you had to balance it with a doorway on the other side. And so from standing here in this position, you had a doorway, and that was the main entrance doorway. Then you had a doorway on the side and a doorway over on the other side. And then people would come in and they would see benches lined up along here and benches lined up along here. And then up front here would be benches facing in this direction, and they were called facing benches. And they were for certain people to sit upon, usually people who spoke and leaders of the meeting were to be sitting on the facing benches. And this wall right here was not here. This wall went back a distance of 4 feet, and then there was a brick wall. And that was later on moved. The panels on the side are original. The panels on this side here and over there, balancing over there, they are original so far as we know, and they are in keeping with Quaker style of simplicity. Very simple panels. They have been painted over, but they are the original panels. And to hold up the gallery up top, you have these posts, and then the beam across. And you'll note that the posts that are holding these up are 1/3, 1/3. They are 1/3 apart. On the other side, that was added later, the posts are not 1/3, 1/3, and that makes a rather big difference, which I'll explain later. But people would come in and they would go up the stairs, and the stairs then ran out this way, not the way they are today. The stairs today have been changed around in 1950 when they converted this building into a school. And so they come down this way with a heater room and then lavatories and then a kitchen. But that's not the way it was then. So the stairs came down, and the stairs came down on this side, so you would come in and you would go up the stairs, whichever way you wanted. There was a practice for women and children to sit on one side and adult men on the other side. And so there were enough Quakers to fill up these benches here and to fill up the galleries. And as time passed, the meeting grew in size, and the result was that in 1784 they decided to expand the building, and they doubled the size of the building, and they doubled the size of the galleries up top, and that made a big difference, and we'll see in the other room shortly how they changed that. But this room goes back to 1715, and in October of 1777, this room was used as a hospital where the wounded were taken from the Battle of Fort Mercer, and many of them came here to be treated for their wounds. And this place played a rather large place in history by being a hospital after that battle. Okay, now we'll go into the other room and talk about that. The room into which we are walking was actually finished being built in the spring of 1765. And this room gives us information about the other room, which is the older room that was finished in 1715. It was started to be built in 1714 in the spring, and then was finished in 1715. And then in 1784, they decided that the meeting house had grown in numbers and people who were attending, that they added on to that building. So the 300th anniversary of this meeting house is the 300th anniversary of that side of the meeting house, and this side of the meeting house is not as old. But I need to point out certain things about the meeting house that gives us information about the original building. So, the original building actually came out to here, 4 feet beyond this. And there's a smudge on the wall over there that I put there by accident one time, and that tells us where this wall was. So that the original building came out to here and it faced Broad Street. So Broad Street was the front of the building. It had a style of architecture that was common in those days. It was called Georgian architecture, and it was built on the concept of balance. So in other words, if you have a window over here, you have another window over here. If you have a doorway here in the middle, it would be balanced. A doorway on the side, another doorway on the side. And so if we can imagine that instead of this being here, that this is a wall, and that wall was made from the bricks of this wall that was torn down. And this was the facing benches. And when they decided to add 26 feet to the existing meeting house, which means that the front of the meeting house is going to become 52 feet. So what they basically did was they changed the meeting house around so that this is now the front of the meeting house. And built this, tore down this wall, moved this wall to that wall, and we can believe that the original windows were in the same place on this wall, and then were moved there, and they are where they are today. And then they built this room. The chief architect was John Cooper. John Cooper was a very interesting person, controversial person in regard to Woodbury meeting, because he supported the American Revolution. He was one of the original writers of the first Constitution for the state of New Jersey and a member of the legislature of the state of New Jersey. And his son was a member of the Second Continental Congress. And he supported the American Revolution, generally speaking, and lived up the street. His house has since been torn down, and he was the architect. And so they built this room because the numbers of people who came in here, and in order to do so, what they had to do was they had to change the building around. And so they built a gallery up there, and there was an already existing gallery on the other side. To support the gallery in the other